What if the key to making him obsess wasn't your looks, but your mind? I know. That sounds like something your grandmother might have told you while adjusting her reading glasses. But before you roll your eyes and click away, let me paint you a picture that might just change everything you thought you knew about attraction. Picture this: you're at a coffee shop, maybe scrolling through your phone when someone catches your attention. Not because they're drop-dead gorgeous, though they're certainly easy on the eyes, but because of something they said. Something so unexpectedly clever, so intellectually stimulating that your brain literally lights up like a Christmas tree. Suddenly, you find yourself leaning in, hanging on their every word, completely captivated by the way their mind works. That, my friends, is the power of intellectual seduction, and it's about to become your secret weapon. Here's where things get really interesting from a psychological standpoint. When Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman studied how our brains respond to mental engagement, he discovered something fascinating. Cognitive stimulation doesn't just make us think, it makes us feel. Every time someone challenges our intellect in a pleasurable way, our brains release a cocktail of neurotransmitters, including dopamine, the same chemical associated with falling in love. It's like a natural high that creates an almost addictive craving for more intellectual interaction with that specific person. Let me share a little story that perfectly illustrates this principle. A friend of mine, Sarah, was on what she thought would be just another boring first date. The guy seemed nice enough, but nothing special, until he casually mentioned that he'd been reading about the psychology of dreams and wondered aloud whether our subconscious minds were actually more creative than our waking selves. What started as polite dinner conversation turned into a 3-hour deep dive into consciousness, creativity, and the mysteries of the human psyche. Sarah told me later that she'd never felt so intellectually turned on in her life. They've been together for 2 years now, and she still gets that same rush when they have their late-night philosophical discussions. This isn't just some romantic fairy tale, it's science in action. When we engage in stimulating intellectual exchanges, our brains create what researchers call cognitive resonance. It's like finding someone who speaks your mental language fluently, creating an instant sense of connection that goes far deeper than surface-level attraction. The beautiful thing about intellectual obsession is that it builds upon itself. The more someone appreciates your mind, the more they want to explore it, understand it, and ultimately possess it. Now, you might be wondering exactly how this psychological what-if experiment plays out in real life. How do you transform casual conversations into mind-melding experiences that leave someone thinking about you long after you've parted ways? How do you become the person whose thoughts occupy their mental space, whose perspectives they crave, whose intellectual presence becomes as addictive as their morning coffee? That's where our 7 intellectual seduction hacks come into play, each one backed by psychological research and designed to create that irresistible mental magnetism. We're talking about the art of strategic vulnerability that makes someone feel like they're discovering hidden treasures in your mind, the power of intellectual mirroring that creates an almost telepathic connection, the mystery of controlled revelation that keeps them constantly curious about what fascinating thoughts you'll share next. There's the technique of cognitive challenges that position you as an intellectual equal worth pursuing, and the subtle art of emotional intelligence that makes every interaction feel deeply meaningful. We'll explore how to use paradoxical thinking to become utterly unpredictable in the best possible way. And finally, the ultimate hack that transforms casual acquaintances into devoted intellectual companions who can't imagine their mental landscape without you in it. But here's what makes this entire approach so powerful. It's completely authentic. Unlike superficial pickup techniques or manipulative mind games, intellectual seduction is about genuinely connecting with someone on the deepest level possible, mind to mind, thought to thought, soul to soul. When you master these techniques, you're not just attracting someone to a facade, you're drawing them to the real you, the brilliant, fascinating, irreplaceable you. Before we dive into these game-changing strategies, I'm absolutely dying to know about your own experiences with intellectual attraction. Have you ever found yourself completely smitten with someone's mind? Maybe it was a professor whose lectures left you spellbound, or a coworker whose innovative ideas made your heart race faster than their smile. Ever could. Drop your stories in the comments below. I read every single one, and some of the most incredible intellectual love stories have started with the most unexpected conversations. And here's a quick question for you to ponder. Have you ever consciously used your intelligence to attract someone? Yes or no? Let me know in the comments, because understanding where you're starting from will help you see just how transformative these techniques can be. Imagine for a moment that you could turn any casual chat into an unbreakable intellectual bond. Picture someone leaving a conversation with you and finding that they can't stop thinking about the fascinating perspectives you shared, the brilliant questions you asked, the way you made their mind feel more alive than it had in months. Imagine becoming the person whose thoughts they crave, whose intellectual presence becomes as essential to their happiness as oxygen. Ready to discover exactly how to make that happen? Because the first hack we're about to explore will completely revolutionize the way you think about conversation itself. Picture this: you're sitting across from someone at dinner, the conversation flowing pleasantly but predictably, work, weather, weekend plans. Then mid-bite of your pasta, you casually mention something that stops them cold. Did you know that your brain actually rewrites your memories every time you recall them? So technically, your most cherished childhood memory might be completely different from what actually happened. Suddenly, their fork pauses halfway to their mouth. Their eyes light up with fascination. And for the next hour, you're not just having dinner, you're conducting a psychology experiment in real-time intellectual seduction. What if that's all it takes to transform an ordinary interaction into an extraordinary mental connection? Welcome to your first hack, the curiosity spark, the art of igniting mental fireworks that leave someone's brain craving more of whatever fascinating insights live inside your mind. Here's the beautiful science behind why this works so powerfully. When we encounter something novel and intriguing, our brains don't just process it, they get genuinely excited about it. Neuroscientists have discovered that novelty activates the nucleus accumbens, the same brain region that lights up when we experience pleasure from food, sex, or even addictive substances. It's like your fascinating question or unexpected insight triggers a natural high that makes someone associate that incredible feeling with you specifically. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think intellectual seduction means showing off how much they know, dropping impressive facts like intellectual name tags. That's not curiosity sparking, that's mental peacocking, and it typically has the opposite effect. Real curiosity sparking isn't about demonstrating your intelligence, it's about awakening theirs. Let me tell you about my friend Marcus, who learned this lesson the hard way. He used to approach women at parties with lines like, "Did you know I have a PhD in astrophysics?" Spoiler alert, it never worked. Women would politely smile and find excuses to get another drink, but then he discovered the power of curiosity-driven questions. Instead of announcing his credentials, he started asking things like, if you could have dinner with any person from history, who would it be, and what's the one question you'd be dying to ask them? Suddenly, conversations weren't about impressing anyone. They were about exploring fascinating territories of thought together. The magic happens when you shift from being the person with all the answers to being the person with all the right questions. Think about it. When someone asks you something that makes you pause and think, wow, I've never considered that before, what happens in your mind? You don't just think about the question, you start thinking about the person who asked it. You wonder what kind of mind comes up with such intriguing perspectives. You become curious about their curiosity. Here's your mini mind experiment. Imagine you're talking to someone you're interested in, and instead of asking, what do you do for work? You ask, what's something you've learned recently that completely changed how you see the world? Can you feel the difference? The first question leads to a resume recital. The second opens a door into their intellectual soul, inviting them to share not just what they do, but how they think, what fascinates them, what makes their mind come alive. The most effective curiosity sparks are open-ended questions that don't have right or wrong answers. They have interesting ones. Questions like, if you could solve any mystery in the world, what would keep you up at night researching? Or what's a belief you held for years that you eventually discovered was completely wrong? These aren't just conversation starters, they're invitations to intellectual intimacy. But here's what makes this technique so psychologically powerful. It creates what researchers call cognitive arousal. When someone encounters a thought-provoking question, their brain doesn't just engage, it becomes energized, focused, almost euphoric. They experience what psychologists call the knowledge emotion, that thrilling sensation of their mind expanding in real time. And because you're the catalyst for that incredible feeling, they begin to associate that mental high with your presence. What's your go-to curiosity question? Because here's the thing, the best curiosity sparks feel natural and authentic to who you are. If you're fascinated by human behavior, you might ask about the strangest thing someone believed as a child. If you love exploring possibilities, you could wonder about the roads not taken in their life. The key is matching your genuine curiosity with questions that invite others to share their fascinating inner worlds. Now, I want you to try something. Think about the last conversation you had that left you feeling genuinely energized and excited. I'm willing to bet it wasn't because someone told you impressive facts about themselves. It was because they asked you something that made you think in ways you hadn't before, or because they shared a perspective that opened new mental pathways you didn't know existed. The beauty of curiosity sparking is that it works in any context. Whether you're on a first date, at a networking event, or just trying to deepen a friendship, the right question can transform a surface-level interaction into a meaningful connection. You become the person who makes others feel intellectually alive, whose presence turns ordinary moments into extraordinary explorations of thought and pose. Ability. But here's where things get really interesting, and this is crucial. The curiosity spark is just the beginning. Once you've ignited someone's intellectual interest, once you've awakened their mind to new possibilities, what if you took it deeper? What if you could layer that initial fascination with something even more powerful, emotional resonance that makes your mental connection feel not just stimulating, but meaningful? Try this hack tonight and share in the comments how it goes. Because what we're about to explore next will show you exactly how to transform that spark of curiosity into something that burns much, much brighter. So you've mastered the art of sparking curiosity, turning ordinary conversations into intellectual adventures. But what if a well-timed joke could actually rewire his attraction to you? What if the secret to making someone mentally obsessed isn't just about asking the right questions, but knowing exactly how to make them laugh while doing it? Welcome to the psychology of wit, where humor becomes your most powerful brain hack. This isn't about telling knock-knock jokes or memorizing one-liners from the internet. This is about crafting playful banter that creates an irresistible neurochemical cocktail in someone's brain, making them associate you with joy, comfort, and that addictive feeling of being truly understood. Here's the fascinating science behind why humor is such an intellectual aphrodisiac. When Sigmund Freud studied laughter over a century ago, he discovered that humor serves as a psychological release valve. It allows us to express thoughts and tensions that might otherwise feel too risky or vulnerable to share. Modern neuroscience has taken this even further, showing that genuine laughter triggers the release of oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, along with endorphins that create feelings of euphoria and connection. But here's where it gets really interesting. When someone makes you laugh, your brain doesn't just enjoy the moment, it craves more interactions with that person. It's like your neural circuits get rewired to seek out their company because they consistently provide that delightful cocktail of mental stimulation and emotional release. Let me share a story that perfectly illustrates this principle. My friend Emma was on what felt like the world's most boring coffee date. The guy was perfectly nice but painfully earnest, talking extensively about his job in accounting with the enthusiasm of someone reading a tax manual. Just when Emma was mentally planning her polite exit strategy, he made an offhand comment about how his spreadsheets were sexier than his dating life. Without missing a beat, Emma replied, "Well, at least your spreadsheets probably have better pickup lines than want to see my pivot tables." The shift was instantaneous. He burst out laughing, his whole demeanor relaxed, and suddenly they were trading witty observations about everything from office culture to the absurdity of modern dating. That boring coffee date turned into a 4-hour conversation that led to a relationship that's still going strong. The magic happened because Emma didn't just make a joke, she created what psychologists call cognitive play. She took his vulnerable admission and turned it into something they could laugh about together, instantly transforming potential awkwardness into shared amusement. This is the essence of intellectual seduction through humor. You're not just entertaining someone, you're creating a safe space where their mind can relax and open up. The most effective witty banter follows what I call the yes and principle borrowed from improvisational comedy. Instead of shutting down someone's thoughts or trying to one-up them, you build on what they've said while adding your own clever twist. If someone mentions they're terrible at cooking, instead of saying, "Oh, me too," you might respond with, "I'm convinced my smoke alarm thinks it's a dinner bell at this point." You're acknowledging their experience while adding a layer of humor that makes the conversation more engaging and memorable. Picture this hypothetical scenario. You're at a party and someone mentions they're reading a self-help book about productivity. Instead of the typical, "Oh, how is it?" response, you could say with a playful grin, "Let me guess, you bought it 3 months ago and it's been sitting on your nightstand, ironically making you feel less productive every time you see it." If you've read the room right, they'll probably laugh because you've just articulated something hilariously true about the human condition. But more importantly, you've demonstrated that you understand not just what they said, but the psychology behind it. This kind of witty observation does something powerful to the brain. It creates what researchers call benevolent superiority, the delightful feeling of being understood by someone who clearly gets not just your situation, but your inner experience of that situation. It's intellectual intimacy disguised as humor. Pause and think, what's the funniest thing that's won someone over for you? Because here's what I bet happened. It wasn't just that you made them laugh. It was that your humor revealed something about how your mind works, how you see the world, how you can find joy and cleverness in unexpected places. The key to masterful banter is timing and authenticity. Your humor needs to feel natural, not forced. It should emerge from genuine observations about the world, not from a desperate attempt to be entertaining. The best witty banter feels effortless because it's rooted in how you actually think and perceive things. But here's what makes humor so psychologically addictive as a bonding tool. It creates shared experiences of joy. When you make someone laugh, you're not just telling them a joke, you're inviting them into your particular way of seeing the world. You're saying, "This is how my mind finds delight in ordinary moments. Want to see the world through my eyes for a second?" And when they laugh, they're essentially saying yes to that invitation. The neurochemical response to shared laughter creates what psychologists call interpersonal synchrony. Your brains literally start operating in harmony. Heart rates align, breathing patterns sync up, and those feel-good chemicals Lude both your systems simultaneously. It's like a mini psychology experiment in bonding that happens naturally through well-crafted wit. Now, here's the beautiful thing about using humor as an intellectual seduction tool. It's completely authentic. You're not pretending to be someone you're not. You're simply showcasing the playful, clever aspects of your personality. You're demonstrating that being around you means experiencing more joy, more laughter, more moments where life feels lighter and more amusing. But what happens when you combine that foundation of curiosity and humor with something even more powerful? What if you could take all that playful connection and add a layer of carefully crafted vulnerability that makes someone feel like they're seeing parts of your mind that no one else gets to witness? Now, let's add some vulnerability to the mix. You've sparked their curiosity and made them laugh, but what if sharing your deepest passions could make him see you as completely irreplaceable? What if the key to intellectual obsession isn't just about being clever or funny, but about revealing the parts of your mind that light up with genuine excitement and vulnerability? This is where we dive into the psychology of profound connection through what I call the deep dive duo. Two interconnected hacks that transform casual intellectual attraction into something much more powerful and lasting. The first hack revolves around discovering and exploring shared intellectual passions. Here's the fascinating thing about human psychology. When we find someone who genuinely shares our interests, especially our more niche or passionate ones, our brains don't just register it as nice, they experience it as rare and valuable. Daniel Kahneman's research on cognitive biases shows us that similarity attraction isn't just about liking people who are like us. It's about feeling understood and validated in ways that most people simply can't provide. Think about the last time someone got genuinely excited about something you're passionate about. Maybe it's sustainable architecture, the psychology of dreams, or the philosophical implications of artificial intelligence. Remember that rush of excitement when you realized they didn't just tolerate your enthusiasm, but actually shared it? That's your brain releasing a cocktail of bonding chemicals because it's recognizing a rare intellectual match. I have a friend, David, who's absolutely obsessed with behavioral economics. For years, he felt like he was boring people at parties when he'd start talking about irrational decision-making patterns. Then he met someone at a bookstore who was buying the same Dan Ariely book he was returning. They ended up debating loss aversion theory over coffee for 3 hours. He later told me it was the first time he felt like someone truly appreciated not just his intelligence, but his specific brand of intellectual curiosity. They're married now, and their idea of date night is conducting their own little psychology experiments on consumer behavior. But here's the crucial insight. You don't need to share every interest to create this connection. Sometimes the magic happens when someone shows genuine fascination with your passion, even if they don't share it themselves. When you can make someone feel like their intellectual enthusiasm is not just tolerated but celebrated, you become associated with that incredible feeling of being truly seen and appreciated. Picture this mind experiment scenario. You're on a date, and instead of the usual small talk, you discover you both have a secret fascination with the ethics of memory manipulation. Suddenly, you're not just having dinner, you're debating whether it would be moral to erase traumatic memories, exploring the implications for personal identity, questioning what makes us fundamentally ourselves. Your conversation becomes a philosophical adventure where both minds are fully engaged, challenged, and energized. This isn't just intellectual compatibility, it's intellectual chemistry. The second hack takes this even deeper through what I call strategic intellectual vulnerability. This is about sharing not just what you know, but what you don't know, your intellectual insecurities, your fascinating failures, your evolving thoughts on complex subjects. Neuroscience research on empathy shows that when someone shares a vulnerability, it activates mirror neurons in the listener's brain, creating a neurological foundation for deeper connection and trust. But intellectual vulnerability is different from emotional vulnerability. Instead of sharing your deepest fears or past traumas, you're revealing your thinking processes, your intellectual doubts, your moments of changing your mind about important ideas. You might say something like, "I used to be completely convinced that free will was an illusion, but lately I've been reading some philosophers who are making me question everything I thought I knew about consciousness and choice." This kind of sharing does something remarkable to the brain. It demonstrates intellectual humility while simultaneously showcasing the depth of your thinking. It shows that your mind is active, evolving, willing to be changed by new information, qualities that are incredibly attractive to other thoughtful people. Here's a funny story that illustrates this perfectly. My friend Rachel was on a date with someone she really wanted to impress with her intelligence. She'd been preparing witty comments about current events and insightful observations about the restaurant's menu. But when the conversation turned to artificial intelligence, instead of pretending to be more knowledgeable than she was, she admitted, "Honestly, the more I learn about AI, the more I realize I don't understand about consciousness itself." Like, how can we create artificial minds when we can't even agree on what makes human minds conscious? Her date was immediately intrigued, not because she had all the answers, but because she was grappling with such fascinating questions. The psychology behind this is profound. When you reveal your intellectual vulnerabilities alongside your strengths, you create what researchers call optimal distinctiveness. You're showing that you're smart enough to engage with complex ideas, but human enough to admit when those ideas challenge or confuse you. It's like giving someone a glimpse into your mental workshop, showing them not just your finished thoughts, but your thinking process itself. This combination of shared passions and strategic vulnerability creates something psychologists call intellectual intimacy, a unique form of closeness that's based on minds truly meeting and recognizing each other. It's the feeling that this person doesn't just appreciate your intelligence. They understand your particular brand of curiosity, your specific way of engaging with ideas. Which hack resonates more with you, finding those shared intellectual passions that make conversations feel like coming home, or revealing the vulnerable, evolving aspects of your thinking that make someone feel trusted with your real mental landscape? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you want to share specific scenarios where either approach worked for you, add a timestamp so others can find your stories easily. But here's where our intellectual seduction journey gets really interesting. You've established curiosity, added humor, found common ground, and created intimacy through vulnerability. What happens when you're ready to take someone's mind to places it's never been before, ready to challenge his worldview in ways that make your presence absolutely unforgettable? You've built curiosity, shared laughs, found common intellectual ground, and opened windows into your evolving mind. But psychology, what if a friendly debate could light the spark of obsession? What if the very act of challenging someone's ideas, done with the right blend of respect and intellectual passion, could make them crave your mental presence like an addiction? This is where we enter the realm of intellectual challenge, the art of creating productive friction that ignites rather than burns. These next two hacks operate on a fascinating principle. Our brains are wired to be most attracted to minds that simultaneously comfort and challenge us, that make us feel understood while pushing us to think in new ways. The fifth hack revolves around the strategic use of intellectual debates to stimulate critical thinking. Now, before you imagine aggressive arguments or combative discussions, let me paint a different picture. This is about creating what psychologists call benevolent challenge, disagreeing in ways that demonstrate respect for someone's intelligence while inviting them to explore ideas from angles they might not have considered. Here's the neuroscience that makes this so powerful. When our beliefs are gently challenged by someone we respect, our brains experience something called cognitive dissonance. Instead of shutting down, a curious mind actually becomes more engaged, working harder to either defend its position or integrate new information. Modern brain imaging studies show that this kind of intellectual stimulation activates the same reward pathways as physical attraction, creating a literal neurochemical cocktail of excitement and engagement. Picture this scenario. You're discussing artificial intelligence with someone who believes AI will never truly replicate human creativity. Instead of agreeing or dismissing their view, you might say, "That's fascinating. I love how you're thinking about creativity as fundamentally human. But what if we're approaching this backwards? What if AI doesn't need to replicate human creativity but could develop its own forms that we haven't even imagined yet?" Notice what's happening here. You're not attacking their intelligence or calling them wrong. You're inviting them into a mental dance where both perspectives can coexist and evolve. I learned this lesson through a somewhat embarrassing personal experience. I was at a dinner party, feeling intellectually confident when someone mentioned they thought meditation was just trendy nonsense. My first instinct was to launch into a passionate defense of mindfulness research. Instead, I caught myself and said, "I'm really curious about that perspective. What specifically feels inauthentic to you about it?" What followed was a 2-hour conversation where we explored the commercialization of ancient practices, the psychology of wellness trends, and the difference between genuine contemplative practices and Instagram spirituality. By the end, neither of us had completely changed our positions, but we'd both expanded our thinking, and he later told friends I was the most interesting person at the party. The magic happens when you debate ideas, not people. When you can disagree with someone's position while clearly respecting their intelligence, you create what researchers call intellectual safety, the feeling that their mind is valued even when their conclusions are questioned. This makes people feel both challenged and appreciated, a combination that's psychologically irresistible. But here's where the sixth hack takes things to an even more intriguing level: the art of mystery teasing through selective knowledge revelation. This draws from the psychological principle of scarcity. We value what feels rare or partially hidden. When you hint at depths of knowledge without fully revealing them, you create what behavioral psychologists call curiosity gaps that the brain desperately wants to fill. This isn't about being pretentious or playing hard to get with information. It's about strategic sharing that leaves people wanting to know more about how your mind works. You might mention in passing that you've been reading about the philosophy of consciousness, then shift the conversation before fully exploring the topic. Or you could reference an interesting book or idea, give just enough detail to spark curiosity, then say something like, "But that's probably getting too deep into rabbit holes for tonight." What's a debate topic you'd use to create this kind of intellectual tension? Because here's the thing, the best challenging conversations emerge from subjects you're genuinely passionate about, topics where your authentic curiosity and knowledge naturally shine through. Imagine this psychology experiment in action. You're having what seems like a casual conversation about movies when you casually mention that you've been thinking about how certain films function as modern mythology, serving the same psychological purposes that ancient stories once did for their cultures. You give one intriguing example, then gracefully move to another topic, leaving them with questions they didn't know they had about narrative psychology and cultural storytelling. The neurological response is fascinating. When information feels incomplete but compelling, our brains activate what's called the Zeigarnik effect. We literally can't stop thinking about unfinished or partially understood concepts. By creating these curiosity gaps, you become associated with unresolved mental intrigue that keeps drawing their thoughts back to you. But here's where the self-deprecating humor I mentioned becomes crucial. The key to successful intellectual challenging and mystery teasing is maintaining warmth and approachability. I once made the mistake of being too mysterious about a book I was reading, coming across as pretentious rather than intriguing. Now I've learned to balance intellectual depth with genuine humility, saying things like, "I'm probably overthinking this, but I've been fascinated by how our brains create meaning from randomness, though I'm still figuring out what that means for how we understand coincidences." These challenge catalysts work because they demonstrate that your mind is both engaging and mysterious, both accessible and endlessly deep. You become someone who makes others think more clearly while simultaneously making them realize how much they still want to learn about ideas, about the world, and especially about the fascinating ways your brain processes and connects concepts. The psychological momentum we're building here is crucial. You've established yourself as curious, funny, passionate, vulnerable, and now intellectually challenging in the most attractive way possible. But there's one more hack that ties everything together, one final technique that seals the obsession by making your intellectual presence feel absolutely essential to their mental well-being. One more hack to seal the obsession, and this final technique will show you how to become not just interesting to think about, but impossible to stop thinking about. What if combining these hacks created unbreakable mental chemistry? What if the real secret to intellectual obsession isn't mastering individual techniques, but learning to weave them together so seamlessly that every conversation becomes a symphony of curiosity, humor, passion, vulnerability, challenge, and mystery? Welcome to the ultimate hack, the Obsession Integrator. This is where everything we've explored transforms from separate tools into a fluid, natural way of connecting that makes your intellectual presence absolutely irresistible. Think of it as conducting a psychological orchestra where every element harmonizes to create something far more powerful than the sum of its parts. Here's the fascinating neuroscience behind why integration works so powerfully. Recent studies on holistic neuroplasticity in relationships show that when our brains experience multiple forms of positive stimulation simultaneously, intellectual challenge, emotional safety, humor, novelty, and connection, they don't just add these experiences together. They multiply them, creating what researchers call synergistic neural bonding. It's like your brain recognizes that this person provides a complete intellectual and emotional ecosystem, making their presence feel essential rather than just enjoyable. Let me walk you through a comprehensive mind experiment that demonstrates how this integration works in real time. Picture yourself meeting someone interesting at a bookstore cafe. Instead of relying on just one approach, you're naturally flowing between all our hacks as the conversation evolves. It starts with curiosity sparking when you notice they're reading a book on behavioral economics. Instead of the typical, "How do you like it?" you ask, "What's the most surprising thing you've learned about your own decision-making?" They light up, sharing a story about realizing they always buy more expensive wine when classical music is playing in stores. You respond with witty banter, laughing as you admit, "I'm pretty sure grocery stores have figured out that playing slow music makes me spend twice as long debating whether I need artisanal pasta." The humor creates immediate warmth and connection. As the conversation deepens, you discover a shared passion for understanding human irrationality, leading to an animated discourse about why people make decisions that seem to contradict their own best interests. This is where intellectual vulnerability enters naturally, You share how you used to think you were completely rational until you started tracking your own biases and realized you were just as predictably irrational as everyone else, just in different ways. Then comes the gentle challenge catalyst. When they mention they think people should just try harder to be logical, you playfully push back. But what if trying to eliminate our irrationality completely would actually make us less human? What if some of our mistakes in thinking are actually features, not bugs? The conversation becomes a friendly intellectual dance where you're both exploring ideas together rather than trying to win points. Finally, you employ mystery teasing by mentioning that you've been reading about something called predictably irrational compassion. How our emotional decision-making sometimes leads to better outcomes than pure logic would, but you don't fully explain it. Instead, you suggest continuing the conversation another time, creating that irresistible curiosity gap. The magic happens because none of these techniques feel forced or artificial. They emerge naturally from genuine curiosity and authentic engagement with both the person and the ideas you're discussing. Your brain becomes associated with intellectual excitement, emotional safety, stimulating challenge, and intriguing mystery all at once. But here's where I have to share a humorous cautionary tale about what happens when integration goes wrong. My friend Jake got so excited about trying all these techniques that he attempted to use them simultaneously in his first conversation with someone he'd just met at a coffee shop. Within 10 minutes, he'd asked 3 probing questions, made 4 witty observations, shared 2 vulnerabilities, started a debate about free will, and mysteriously alluded to fascinating research on consciousness that he couldn't discuss in detail. The poor woman looked like she'd been hit by an intellectual tornado. The lesson? Integration means natural flow, not technique bombardment. The key to successful integration is reading the psychological temperature of the conversation and matching your approach to what feels authentic and appropriate in the moment. Sometimes curiosity sparking is enough. Other times, the situation calls for gentle challenging or vulnerable sharing. The obsession integrator isn't about using every hack in every conversation. It's about having all these tools available and knowing when to deploy them naturally. What makes this integration so psychologically powerful is that it demonstrates intellectual multidimensionality. You're not just smart or just funny or just mysterious. You're a complete intellectual package that provides multiple types of mental stimulation and emotional satisfaction. The brain recognizes this completeness and begins to crave it because it's so rare to find someone who can consistently provide such a rich cognitive experience. Studies on relationship psychology show that the strongest intellectual bonds form when people experience what researchers call cognitive complementarity, where each person's mind feels enhanced by contact with the other. When you integrate all these hacks naturally, you become someone who doesn't just appreciate other people's intelligence, but actually makes them feel more intelligent, more curious, more alive intellectually than they do with anyone else. This is the psychology experiment of creating intellectual obsession in its most sophisticated form. You're not manipulating anyone or putting on a false persona. You're simply showcasing the most engaging, multifaceted aspects of your authentic intellectual personality in ways that create maximum positive impact on someone else's mind and emotions. The beautiful thing about mastering this integration is that it becomes genuinely effortless over time. These approaches start feeling natural because they're based on authentic curiosity about other minds and genuine appreciation for intellectual connection. You're not following a script, you're expressing your real personality through the most psychologically effective channels. But as we wrap up this journey through intellectual seduction, it's crucial to reflect on the ethical applications of everything we've explored. Because with great psychological power comes great responsibility, and understanding how to create intellectual obsession means also understanding when and how to use these insights in ways that genuinely benefit everyone involved. Comment your customized playbook below. Which combination of these hacks feels most authentic to your personality? Because the real magic happens when you take these psychological principles and adapt them to your unique intellectual style. So what if this intellectual seduction changed your love life forever? What if mastering these 7 psychology-backed techniques didn't just help you attract someone's mind, but actually transformed how you connect with every interesting person you encounter. As we reach the end of our mind experiment journey, it's time to bridge the gap between fascinating theory and life-changing reality. Let's take a moment to reflect on what we've discovered together. We started with the curiosity spark, learning how the right questions can literally rewire someone's brain to crave more interactions with you. We explored the witty banter blueprint, understanding how humor creates neurochemical bonding that makes your presence feel essential to someone's happiness. Through the deep dive duo of shared passions and intellectual vulnerability, we saw how authentic connection happens when minds truly meet and recognize each other. The challenge catalyst showed us that gentle intellectual friction can create the most powerful attraction, while the obsession integrator revealed how weaving all these elements together creates something far more powerful than any single technique. But here's what makes this entire approach so ethically beautiful: every C. Engli hack is rooted in genuine appreciation for other people's intelligence and authentic expression of your own intellectual gifts. This is crucial to understand. Intellectual seduction isn't about manipulation or creating false personas. It's about showcasing the most engaging aspects of your real personality in psychologically effective ways. When you spark someone's curiosity, you're genuinely interested in their thoughts. When you share witty observations, you're expressing your authentic sense of humor. When you reveal intellectual vulnerabilities, you're building real intimacy based on mutual respect and understanding. Research from positive psychology shows that the strongest long-term attractions are built on what Dr. Barbara Fredrickson calls micro moments of positivity resonance. Brief but meaningful exchanges where two minds genuinely connect and appreciate each other. Every hack we've explored creates these micro moments, but only when applied with sincere interest in the other person's well-being and genuine consent to intellectual engagement. The ethical foundation here cannot be overstated. These techniques work because they make both people feel more intelligent, more interesting, and more valued. True intellectual seduction is always mutual. You're not extracting something from someone, you're creating something beautiful together. If someone seems uncomfortable with intellectual banter or deep conversation, the ethical response is always to gracefully shift to their comfort level, not to push harder with these techniques. So how do you translate these insights into real-world applications? Start small and stay authentic. Choose one or two hacks that feel most natural to your personality and practice integrating them into conversations you're already having. Maybe you're naturally curious, so focus on mastering the art of asking questions that reveal people's fascinating inner worlds. Perhaps you're witty by nature, so work on timing your humor to create maximum connection and comfort. Here's a practical mental health hack that applies these principles to everyday life. Try approaching every interesting conversation as an opportunity to make the other person feel intellectually appreciated. Instead of focusing on impressing them with your knowledge, focus on drawing out and celebrating their insights. This shift in mindset naturally incorporates most of our techniques while keeping you grounded in genuine care for others. The beautiful thing about intellectual seduction is that it's a skill that improves every relationship in your life. These aren't just dating techniques. They're ways of connecting more meaningfully with friends, colleagues, family members, and anyone whose mind you find intriguing. When you master the art of intellectual appreciation, you become someone people actively seek out for stimulating conversation and genuine connection. Picture this outcome. 6 months from now, you've integrated these approaches so naturally that you don't even think about them consciously. You're simply someone who asks fascinating questions, shares thoughtful humor, reveals authentic vulnerabilities, and engages in conversations that leave people feeling more alive and intellectually energized. People start describing you as magnetic, fascinating, or the kind of person who makes everyone around them more interesting. But more importantly, you've attracted someone whose mind truly captivates you, someone who appreciates not just your intelligence, but your particular way of engaging with ideas and the world. Your conversations flow effortlessly between curiosity and humor, challenge and comfort, sharing and discovering. You've created that rare thing, a relationship where both minds genuinely obsess over each other in the healthiest possible way. This is the ultimate psychology experiment outcome, not just attracting someone to your mind, but creating a dynamic where intellectual attraction becomes mutual intellectual obsession, where both people feel like they've found the mental companion they've been searching for their entire lives. The research is clear. Relationships built on intellectual compatibility and mutual mental stimulation are not only more satisfying but significantly more likely to last. When you connect with someone mind-to-mind first, that foundation supports everything else. Physical attraction deepens because it's layered with mental appreciation. Emotional bonds strengthen because they're based on genuine understanding, and conflicts resolve more easily because you both value and trust each other's thinking processes. If you're ready to transform how you connect with fascinating minds, I challenge you to pick your strongest hack from today's exploration and try it in your next interesting conversation. Will you try these hacks? Give this video a thumbs up if you're ready to experiment with intellectual seduction in your own life. And here's where I need your help building our What If Mind Lab community. Share your success stories in the comments below. When you try these techniques, what works best for your personality? What unexpected connections have you created? Your experiences could be the inspiration that helps someone else discover their own intellectual magnetism. Don't forget to subscribe for more psychology what if experiments that could change how you understand attraction, connection, and the fascinating ways our minds influence each other. Hit that notification bell because next week, we're exploring another mind-bending question that might just revolutionize how you think about human behavior entirely. The psychology of intellectual obsession isn't just theory, it's your new reality waiting to unfold.